All right, we are now live.
All right, awesome.
So we'll give it a few minutes for people to jump in.
Okay, sounds good to me. Looking forward to the conversation.
I am as well. Mm. Okay, so it is 11 o'clock, so we can go ahead and get started. So, thank you guys for joining us. My name is Pam Fleming. I am the CEO of Change Navigators LLC, which is a change management consultancy. I am so happy to welcome my great friend Ty Cochran to the show today. Ty, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, Pam, and hello, everyone else. My name is Ty Cochran. I am the CEO and founder of Her PM, and we specialize in project management consulting, mostly for the public sector, right? City, counties, and states, making sure that we provide those high quality execution and results.
Great, great. So, we've been talking a lot about project management and change management, and it's been trending all over social media lately as to, you know, what's the difference between the two? Can we work together? How can we, be best buddies? Sometimes there's a little bit disconnect in there. Sometimes, when you step into a project, there's already a project management in place, and then when change management comes in, it's kind of a little bit of stepping on toes. It can be at sometimes because we typically, when you talk about doing things like stakeholder assessment and impact assessment, sometimes project managers do those things.
Mhm.
So Ty and I are here today to talk a little bit about how do we play together in the sandbox, because it's totally possible for us to do so. And plus, I think in order for us to be successful on projects, we actually need to do so.
Right.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Pam, for having me on. But I guess my first question is because you mentioned a lot of things, especially about the stepping on of toes, right?
Yes.
But from your perspective, how crucial is project management, is change management in a successful delivery of a project?
So, Ty, the reality is, I think we both have a role to play. And again, with project management, you guys are responsible for the very critical process of making sure that the project is done on time, within scope, and then within budget.
Right.
But of course, there's a whole people aspect to it, because at the end of the day, regardless what you are implementing, how much money you're spending, how beautiful of a project or a program or whatever it is you're implementing, we are by nature impacting people and the way that they have to fundamentally do something.
Right.
And so, from a change management perspective, we come in because we want to make sure that those who are impacted are fully aware of what's happening. They're fully aware of why it's happening. Because at the end of the day, guess what? People typically don't care as much about the what versus the why. And we have to be ready to articulate, why are we taking on this change? Why are we impacting you? Why are we making you do something different? It could be that we want to be more effective, more efficient. We want to be faster, all of those things. But if I am a consumer of whatever you're implementing, I don't know this, I'm not aware of this, it makes it very difficult. And then I begin to become a resistant person. And then,
Yes.
once that becomes pervasive across the organization, it's hard to come back from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just been my experience with this so far, and hopefully things will get better. So, what's your take on how do you integrate change management principles into project management?
So, first of all, I think it is absolutely critical. My very first project was an enterprise wide project. And again, it was all about painting that WIFM. And it was way before I ever knew what WIFM meant and the what's in it for me. And why we were jumping through so many hoops to inform people of why this project was taking place, right? because now you're going from using a spreadsheet. This is the way we've always done it. It's been comfortable. It was great. And now we're automating something, right? But we need to cast that vision. So I feel like it's a twofold thing. So with project management, as a PM, my job is to cast a vision. But when I add on that layer of change management, like you all help to perfect that vision. You help to put the stamp of approval on why this is really happening, right? You have your methodologies that you're using. And if we don't integrate and, like you said, play in the sandbox together and know that, hey, you're not stepping on my toes, you're helping this project to become that much more successful, right? And at the end of the day, we want this not only to be implemented successfully, but then also for people to keep using it, right? It's that user adoption and the continual use and making sure that the processes continue to stay efficient and people don't circumvent what we've actually put into place.
You know, Ty, you said two great things, and it was two mouthfuls that I really, really love. Number one, you talked about spreadsheets. Oh my goodness, it is so difficult to get people off of their spreadsheets because I worked on a project where we had engineers, and you
Mhm.
know, engineers are the brightest and the smartest people, and man, they can make spreadsheets sing, and they can automate them to make them do whatever they want to. And trying to pull people off of a spreadsheet, even though it's a good thing if you're trying to automate this process, they don't necessarily see it that way because what they're looking at is what am I giving up? They're
Right.
not looking at what am I gaining. So I love the way that you said that because it is so accurate. And I think to this very day, it's accurate. And the second thing that you said that was really pivotal is the fact that we are not competing initiatives. You know, project management and change management, we are complementary of one another. And I think what it does is it when we come to the table and we play in that sandbox and we play well together, man, think of all the things we can do for a project because now we have the project that's being done on time, within scope, within budget, and then you have the people on the other side of it who's aware of what's happening, they're buying into it, they're ready for the implementation to go live. So things really go well when we play well in the sandbox.
Right. We can build tall castles in the sandbox. We can
Oh,
build
I love
tall
it.
castles. I love it. So, with that being said, how do you typically align your project management coming in on a project with your change management methodologies? How do you make those sing?
So, you know, for me, it's very important to have the conversation with the project manager of where are we today? What's
Mm,
the problem we're trying to resolve? And then, you know, I have those conversations. I look at where we are. Then I go back once I get enough useful information from the project manager. Even I may even speak to some VAs to get some information. And then once I get this information, I go back and I look at our change management framework, whichever it is, because you know you go into different organizations. Some organizations have their own framework. Some organizations use ProSci. Some organizations use Bridges model. I mean, there's so many. Some of them use Cotter. So whichever model and framework we use, I go back and I look at what activities and deliverables we need to do from a change management perspective to actually make people understand and aware. And how do we integrate that now into your master project plan?
yeah.
Because the last thing that I want to do is to have my own plan, whereas you know I'm working in a silo against what you're doing. I mean, that's just confusion waiting to happen. Now
Yes.
it's not to say that I can't have my own list of tasks because you know I'm not going to put every every subtask in your project plan,
Right.
but what we are going to do is make sure that those critical milestones, the major milestones, that they're in your project plan so that they can be tracked just like everything else.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. It has to be the integration of the plans, because if you don't integrate the plans, and if we don't have a come to Jesus meeting of this is your lane and this is my lane, then it's never going to work, and we will feel like we are competing against each other instead of trying to work together for the ultimate goal, right? The ultimate good of our stakeholders, the ultimate good of our organizations, and things like that. So I totally agree.
Thank you for saying that because that is very true. The last thing that we want to do is come in and step on each other's toes because you know we come into these projects a lot of times. Well, project management, you guys probably get a much easier head start than we do. But from a change perspective, we rarely get brought in on the beginning. I think it's starting to happen now. but we rarely get that opportunity. So when you do think of change management, Ty, how do you handle stakeholder engagement from a project management perspective?
Yeah, and I'm gonna wrap this into your question, but if I go back to one of the things that you just said about change management being brought in later on the back end of the project, I think it's because a lot of times your executive stakeholders don't understand the value of change management. So if we can work to get them to understand that, hey, you have to open up this purse just a little bit wider in
Mhm.
order to bring in change management from the beginning. Because, like you said, it's about the stakeholder assessments and making sure that everyone is on the same page from the very beginning. Because we can build a project plan in a conference room, in a silo, in a vacuum, but we
Yes.
still have to go out and do what's right. So that kind of leads me into your question of how do we handle stakeholder engagement. Um,
Hmm.
Differently when we incorporate that change management. Again, it's all about making sure that we have the early communication. It has to be early, because we want those early adopters. We want those disciples. I call them disciples, or like even change champions. We want those people to go out and spread the good news. So the sooner we are able to identify that by using your management methodologies, the
Hmm.
better off we are as a project team.
That is spot on because I love when you say we need to communicate. One of the premises of change management is communicate early, and communicate often.
Mhm.
A lot of times I hear people say, "Oh, well, there's nothing to communicate." Trust me, there's always something that we can communicate because what happens in the absence of communication? People tend to make up their own stories about what's happening. By the time it starts from A and gets to Z, the story has changed 26 times.
Right.
And then, it's very hard to come back from that water cooler talk. It's very hard to, when people are truly now resistant, it's hard to bring them back from that because once you start communicating too late, I think people begin to believe that you're being inauthentic and
Mhm.
that you're just trying to, calm some waters. Versus if you just start the communication process early and you start it often, man, what a difference that makes in the adoption. And I love the way that you call them. Did you call them disciples? What did you call them?
Disciples, change champions.
I absolutely love that because they are the disciples, because those are the people that you truly want to leverage because you're going to have, 20% of your people are going to be, your early adopters, your
Yeah,
innovators. Then you're going to have that whole 20% that's just going to be totally resistant and against everything. And then you're going to have the rest of the folks that's kind of like in the middle of that bell curve where they're on board, they could be, they can be,
yeah,
but they're somewhere in there.
right.
If you take those disciples, as you call them, which I love the way you say that, you take those disciples, guess what? You can turn those, take those disciples to start pulling those other 20% that are, just totally laggards and resistors.
Yeah,
If we can get those people, those resistors over the hump, man, those will become our biggest cheerleaders. They
yeah,
will be out there spreading the word if we can help them.
yeah.
So, so yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful thing when you can bring those disciples on board.
Yeah, and so you just said a lot about communication, and that shows again to me like where we intersect with change management and project management, because 90%, or at least this is what we are taught that 90% of our jobs as a project manager is to communicate, right? So that just again just shows exactly how we work together, how we walk arm in arm to make sure that these projects are successful, and it's through communication, most of it.
Exactly. And Ty, when you talked a little bit about stakeholder engagement, one of the things that's also critically important, and I love when you say leaders need to kind of loosen that purse string, because when you bring us in very late, we really miss the true opportunity and the robust opportunity to truly understand who are our stakeholders. What's the impact to these stakeholders?
Yeah,
What level are they impacted? Because not everyone's going to be impacted the same.
right.
If we come in when you say, hey, we're going live in a month and we need communications and we need training, good luck. I mean, we do what we can, but the reality is you have to think about it. I always say that there's some very important things that we, from a change management perspective, do at the beginning of a project when we're given that opportunity. Number one is a change magnitude assessment,
Mm,
truly understanding how much of the organization that we're impacting. Are these people centralized? Are they decentralized? What levels are we impacting? Are we impacting frontline? Are we impacting leaders? All of these things are things that we need to flesh out before we can even think about what a communications plan should look like.
mm.
Because if we don't, then we'll just be doing a peanut butter spread across communications, and that's exactly what we don't want to do.
Yeah, and you mentioned training, and I know probably a little bit off target with some of the things that we wanted to talk about, but you mentioned training, and that's such a huge piece of change management that people forget about as well. Can you talk about that and what it means to a project when training is in place, when a training plan is in place?
So training is a critical component because anytime you are doing an ERP implementation, and then most of my experiences have been in ERP implementations in large multinational organizations. So when you don't have a steady training strategy and plan in place, you will struggle. You
Yeah.
will definitely struggle. I like to bring my training people on just as early as I bring my change management people on, and I'll tell you why. Because when we're sitting in your project meetings, and well, basically our project meeting, you
Yes.
know, I'm listening for one thing. I'm listening from a change management perspective. I'm listening to what are the impacts. I'm listening to what are the gaps. I'm listening to, how are people going to be impacted and affected by this change. I'm listening to what are all the processes and how we're going to bring them in, all the things that's changing. I'm listening for that.
Yes.
A training person is going to really be listening at, okay, so what are we doing today versus what are we will be doing tomorrow? What's that gap? How do we fill that gap?
Right.
That's where they start to think about, hey, Pam needs to know this. Ty may need to know this. And again, when we're talking about training, it's not just coming in and building a quick reference guide. We are talking about sitting down and truly building a robust strategy
Yeah.
because that strategy consists of what is that curriculum? How do we and think about this role-based training. We don't just build training for the sake of
Right.
one training for everybody because if one training is for everyone, number one is going to be too long and no one's going to want to attend. And number two, if I only need a sliver of that training, why do I need to sit through 16 hours of training when only 2 hours of it, is relevant to me?
Yeah.
And this is where it comes around to how do we build this training? Because
Mhm.
based on the need, do we need a quick reference guide? Could we do a simulation? Do we need web-based training? Could we do a modified version where it's partly online and partly in class? So all of those things are consideration from a training perspective. But again, if you don't allow us to come in the beginning to get that information, then we have to come and bug Ty and say, hey, Ty, we're asking a million questions that had we been on there, we would have already known. And this is where, project managers get a little bit frustrated with change management because we come in late and we have to ask these questions because we don't know. You guys know the answers, and then you get, sometimes there's a frustration level because you're really busy. You're trying to
Mhm.
get everything done. And God, the hats that you guys wear from a project management perspective, hats off to you because you guys do an awesome job. But we can't expect you to be change managers as well. So
Right. Well, I feel like I've had some pretty good change managers that I've worked with. And if they are kind of bought in later than what they should have been,
mhm.
it's my job to work to catch them up, right? So, first of all, I should have certain things in place, those requirements that my BA should have captured. So, those kind of archival information, I should be able to pull that up and I should be able to have a meeting with you,
Yeah.
your training manager, and whoever else is on your team to catch you up. Because again, we are working right for the same goal. Our vision, our goals should be the same. So whatever that temporary right frustration may be, it just has to be that way because we all want to ensure the success of a project. So.
Yes. Oh, I love that, Ty. Thank you for saying that because, sometimes we don't get that with all project managers. And what you just explained is really the best of both worlds. And this is how, when we come together as a duo, we can be awesome.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I love it. So when it comes to you and the ROI, right? How do you measure the impact of change management on the projects that you've worked on?
So there are so many different ways that we do it, Ty. Basically, I like to start with the end in mind. So
Mm,
I like to understand what's the problem we're trying to resolve, what's the goals, what's the purpose, and
mm,
then I start to think about how do we put strategies in place. Like I'll just say, again, ERP implementation. At the end of the day, I might be looking at, you know, how many people have we trained? How many people have we retrained? I might be looking at help desk tickets to see if help desk tickets have gone up in a certain area. Because if help desk tickets have gone up in a certain area, that could be a cue that number one, it may be the training that's off,
yeah,
or it could be the fact that maybe some of the requirements weren't captured properly. And maybe we need to go back to project management and say, hey, there's something we need to do here.
yeah.
Sometimes it's a skill versus will thing, and that's a whole different conversation. But there are many different ways we look at it. One thing that I always like to bring in is a sustainability plan. So when I say we start with the end in mind, I like to think about how do we leave this organization in a better change readiness state than when we came. So basically, what that means is I'm thinking about once this project goes live, what do we do 30, 60, 90, 120, 180 days post implementation to do all these things? And again, it could be direct observation, it could be sitting with leaders asking, have people use the product. We could also be looking at logins, how many times people have logged into the system. We could be looking at error reports. How many times have people made errors in the system? So there are so many different ways that we can look at how do we look at the ROI of a project. So in that vein, do you use any of the similar metrics, or do you have any different ones that you leverage?
So for me, utilizing my project management software. So again, we are concerned with what the time, right, and how much money is spent.
Yes,
So, a lot of people like, oh, I came in under budget. But, project management teaches us that we're supposed to come in on budget, right? We're supposed to come in on time. So it's reporting on those variances, right? So anything that is kind of out of control, what is it skew? What do those skews look like?
yeah,
So that I can present that back to the executive stakeholders and say, hey, we probably should have brought change management in a little bit sooner, right? Because now we're affecting our timeline. Now we're affecting our budget because of blah, 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 whatever that looks like. But then on the back end, I think it was so important that you said creating what that plan looks like down the road, right?
yeah,
'Cause a lot of people stop, or a lot of PMs stop when the project is over, but you have to help people to put operations into place, right? What does the day to day look like after this system is implemented? What is my role and responsibility? How will
yeah,
I log in? How will I log out? What are the operations that I perform each day?
yeah,
So the things that I help to also put into place, and like you said, it's capturing those metrics of login. Most of the time with like ERP systems, like, okay, are schedules changing? Like, when people are clocking in and out, do you see the number of clock ins going up, or is it going down? So those are the kind of things that you want to make sure that you are capturing maybe after 6 months, because now the system is in and
exactly.
people are, used to it and everything. You want to capture those metrics, and then you want to take it back to the stakeholders, the executive stakeholders, and say, we might still have some problems, or your user group is adopting it well. So that's kind of what I take from it when it comes to metrics.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think you're spot on with that. So yeah, yeah. So
So
I think one of the other things that I would just like to pivot on is I think from a sustainability perspective, we think along the same lines from a project management and change management perspective. Sometimes we just don't always get together to make sure that we are integrating our processes, but I do think that it's important. And one thing that I did want to kind of circle the wagon and come back to a little bit is we talked about communicating and doing all of the right things, but at the end of the day, our job from a change management perspective is really to handle how people transition through change. Because for me, how people experience and transition through change is as important as the change itself. And so we
Mhm.
have to do a better job working with our leaders to help them understand. It's not all about just plugging in a system,
Yeah.
but it's about making sure that people understand the why,
Yeah.
making sure that people understand how they're impacted. So I just wanted to kind of circle the wagon on that because a lot of times it's just overlooked and people assume that it's going to happen, but it doesn't always happen.
Yeah, and I do agree with that. You don't want to just stick a system in, right? You want it to be a solution, right?
Exactly,
Want it to be
exactly.
a solution. So that is what I feel like we can accomplish together as change practitioners, as project management practitioners. We're able to really help to build that solution.
Mhm.
And for me, working in public sector, those solutions are going to be around for a long time, right? Change is real slow in public sector.
Yeah,
And if I'm going to put a solution in, if we're going to make a change like that, like we want it to be impactful, right? And we want to make sure that long term that everyone is going to be able to actually feel that efficiency and feel that we actually work hard to make sure that we were touching all the personas and all of the people and make
yeah.
sure that everyone was good.
You know what? I absolutely love what you just said because it makes so much sense. And I think that when we think about it from the perspective that you just put it, God, it makes a lot of sense about why change management and project management can play in the same
Yeah,
sandbox and be successful because I think it's very much needed and we have to start thinking from that perspective.
we do. We do.
Yeah.
So,
So
sound good. Alrighty. Well, Pam, I have one last question for you because I'm always working off of lessons learned, right?
oh my goodness, yes.
Learn from a pimp. So, what as a change practitioner, what has been your biggest lesson learned working with a project manager on any of your projects?
You know, Ty, I'm going to tell you, my biggest lessons learned has been working with project management and saying, hey, once we've documented a lessons learned, let's actually go back and revisit it before the next project because sometimes we close out a project, we have our lessons learned meeting and we document things, we put a bow on it, we put it on the shelf, we go to the next project and we never even look at the lessons that we've learned to say, hey, what can we pull from what we didn't do well in the last project and bring into this one?
Yeah.
Maybe we had a change strategy, but maybe it wasn't the strongest change strategy. Maybe we didn't bring in, enough training people. Maybe we didn't bring in the right level of change person. So, all of those things are important because it's not about just bringing a warm body into a project. It's about bringing the right resource to execute the right task at the right time so that we can get the best ROI for our money. It's not about just bringing a body. It's about bringing experience. It's about bringing enthusiasm. It's about bringing excitement. It's about bringing ourselves to the table to make the project the best it can be for the people. Because at the end of the day, and I always say this to our change team, to our project teams, we're not building a solution for us because sometimes I've been in project teams where we get so bogged down where we're talking about what we like and what we want to see. It's not for us. We may be consumers of it, but we have to think about the greater population out there that's going to be impacted by it. So, yeah. So I do have another question for you now that I'm talking about this.
Okay.
So let's talk about methodologies because, from a change perspective, there's lots of methodologies out there. There's lots of certifications out there. There's lots of everything out there. Is there like a specific methodology you use? Do you use like, and do you think, what do you think about make versus buy?
Mm. So I usually stick with the PMI methodology of planning, implementation, executing, monitoring, control, and then closing out. Right. The
Mhm.
one thing that I do that I try to make a huge practice of the monitor and controlling.
Uh-huh.
Just making sure that I'm doing that from the very beginning of my project, right? You have to monitor and control from the very beginning. Um,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people kind of just they're stuck in those silos. So I kind of allow the methodology of project management to overlap and intersect. And then also capturing lessons learned, right? I capture lessons learned throughout my project and I take those lessons and I apply them right away. Like, yes, we will do a lessons learned session once the project or phase is completed. But I take those lessons learned and I want to take them and use them right away, right? Because if I have to fail, if I have to go with egg on my face to an executive stakeholder and say I messed up, then you tell me what I did wrong, or I figure out what I did wrong, and I'm taking it to the project team, and we are applying that very quickly. I can't remember the terminology that it is, but it's that active iteration of
Yeah.
learning and growing to making sure that we are all good.
You know what, Ty? I absolutely love that. And guys, if you're out there listening, take a note from what Ty just said because that iterative, agile, being ready to implement in the moment is
Yeah,
critical. She's not necessarily waiting until, the next project. I love how you say you implement those things now because that only serves to make your project much better. And I love that you do it in the moment. You take the lessons learned in the moment, plus you take those lessons learned and you take it to your next project.
yeah.
But absolutely, absolutely love that. So that's been good. But I tell you, Ty, this has been a very good conversation, and I truly appreciate you jumping on here to have the conversation about how do we play together in a sandbox. I think it's important, and I think this conversation should continue. And I'll be continuing the conversation with Ty and others about project management and change management, and not only how we play together in a sandbox, but what are those tasks that we have to do? How do we integrate with one another? So this is it's a subject that's larger than just this one conversation. I think we have to continue expanding on it to make sure that we get the word out there because you know uh change is funny. Change is it's hard. People like to say, oh, anyone can do change management, but the reality is anyone can't do change management. It just like anybody can't do project management. I could never step into your shoes and do what you do and do it to the degree that you can do it. Now I might can fake it till I make it in some spaces, but the reality is I'm not a project manager. That's not my lane, and I'm very grateful for project managers like yourself that I also praise the fact that you said early on that when a change manager come into a project, even if they're coming in late, that you feel that it's your role to bring them up to speed, to help them. I really love that because honestly, I don't see that a lot. I don't get that a lot. And, I hope every project manager that's out there listening take a note from Ty because that just makes our lives that much easier. It makes the project that much easier. So yeah, any departing thoughts, Ty?
No, I think you said it best is that we have to find that space, right, where we can work together and not feel like we're competing forces, and that we all see the greater good for your organization, for your employees, right? You always want to take that step and put yourself in their shoes,
Yeah.
especially when you're going through something that's enterprise wide and you don't know why it's happening. You want to take yourself out of it and put yourself in their shoes. So learn those lessons quick and keep it moving.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Ty. As you guys can see, here's the contact information. If you would like to get in touch with Ty, she is an awesome PM. She's located in the greater Atlanta area.
I am.
So, her information is info@herpm.com if you want to shoot her email. If you want to visit her website is www.herpm.com. And same thing for me, change navigators, info at changenavigators-llc.com. Same thing, www.changenavigators.llc.com. It has truly been a pleasure talking with you, Ty, about this. And I look forward to the next time where we amp this up and talk a little bit more and go into a little bit more detail.
Yes, you too. Thank you, Pam, for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you guys. And thank you, LinkedIn. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.